Have you ever felt like you're your own worst critic, plagued by an internal voice constantly telling you you're not good enough, smart enough, or simply worthy? That pervasive feeling that you're somehow fundamentally flawed, a loser in a world where everyone else seems to have it together. If so, you're certainly not alone. This nagging inner judge, often unseen by others, can become as familiar as the furniture in your own living room, silently eroding your joy, peace, and self-worth. It's a widespread phenomenon, often a significant cause of depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem in our modern world. But what if you could change that relationship with your mind? What if you could silence that critical voice and transform it into an ally, or better yet, a source of inner peace and freedom? This is the promise of Mark Coleman's insightful book, Make Peace with Your Mind: How Mindfulness and Compassion Can Free You from Your Inner Critic. Mark Coleman is an acclaimed meditation teacher, therapist, and consultant, known for his clarity in teaching. Drawing on decades of experience, he offers a practical roadmap to understanding and ultimately defeating this inner critic, guiding us toward a more fulfilling and exemplary life. His work helps us awaken to genuine self-love and our intrinsic goodness, cultivating lasting calm, contentment, and happiness. Let's explore the key insights from this transformative guide. Part 1. The Critic. The Big Picture. Chapter 1. Change is Possible. Neuroplasticity and the Power of Choice. Mark begins by sharing his own profound journey. As a punk rocker filled with rage in his late teens, he was constantly searching for external targets for his anger. Unaware, he had unconsciously become the primary target of his own hatred. His mind was filled with self-flagellation, playing a relentless deficiency tune that told him he was never good enough. His breakthrough came with mindfulness meditation, discovered literally around the corner from his London squat. This practice revealed a revolutionary truth: you can actually change your mind, not just about a decision, but fundamentally rewire how you think and feel. This is thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to change and grow based on where and how you focus your attention. Mark realized that his inherited programming wasn't fixed. He could literally rewrite the code or hack his own brain. By consciously shifting his attention from negative thoughts to what was working well, uplifting, or beautiful, he transformed his experience, much like choosing to observe people's goodness instead of their faults in a public place. This wasn't about denial, but a conscious decision not to be dragged into the critic's gravitational pull. Key takeaways for Chapter 1. Your brain is not a fixed machine. It is dynamic and capable of change through neuroplasticity. Mindfulness gives you the awareness and power to choose where you focus your attention, allowing you to rewrite old, negative mental habits. Consciously focusing on what is positive, good, or possible can radically shift your inner experience and well-being. Even long-held patterns of self-judgment can be transformed by changing your focus. Chapter 2. You are not alone. The epidemic of self-judgment. This chapter highlights the pervasive nature of self-judgment. Mark notes that it's culturally acceptable to discuss our faults, but often considered gauche and egotistical to speak of our successes. He points to alarming mental health statistics, like 1 in 10 Americans being on antidepressants, suggesting the inner critic is a significant cause of much of today's depression, anxiety, and even suicide. The reassuring truth amidst these statistics is that you are not alone. Many carry the same burden of self-reproach, often believing they're the only ones afflicted. Mark observes that in his workshops, the shared realization of similar self-judgments brings immense collective relief and a sense of camaraderie, alleviating the shaming feeling of isolation. Key takeaways for Chapter 2. Self-judgment is a pervasive cultural habit, often discussed more readily than our successes. The inner critic contributes significantly to widespread depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. The feeling of being alone in your struggle with self-criticism is a common misconception. Many people experience similar inner judgments. Recognizing the universality of the inner critic can foster connection and reduce feelings of shame and isolation. Chapter 3. Imposter Syndrome. If they really knew who I am. A common manifestation of the inner critic is imposter syndrome, the feeling that you don't deserve your success or where you are in life. An astonishing 70% of people experience this, including highly successful individuals like Maya Angelou, Meryl Streep, and even Albert Einstein. Einstein, for example, admitted feeling like an involuntary swindler. The inner voice often taunts, "Who do you think you are?" Period. Mark shares his own experience as a mindfulness teacher, where he sometimes feels like an imposter if he's frustrated in traffic or misplaces his keys, thinking students expect perfect serenity. He emphasizes that mindfulness isn't about being perfect, but about how you relate to your present experience, including anxiety or confusion, with kind, wise attention. The path to overcoming imposter syndrome involves mindful awareness to recognize the thoughts, questioning their truth, and remembering your genuine gifts and strengths. Key takeaways for Chapter 3. Imposter syndrome is a common experience, affecting a large percentage of people, regardless of their achievements. It's the inner critic's voice that perpetuates the feeling of being a fake or unworthy. Mindfulness helps by allowing you to recognize these undermining thoughts and detach from their power. Questioning the truth of these thoughts and focusing on your actual strengths, skills, and talents can help overcome imposter syndrome. Chapter 4. Thief of Peace. The critic as the cause of low self-esteem. Imagine enjoying a peaceful Sunday afternoon, only for a nagging voice to pipe up, telling you you're wasting time and should be doing something more productive, instantly gutting your tranquility with guilt. Or comparing your life to a friend's beautiful house or new car, leading to feelings of not measuring up. This chapter vividly illustrates how the inner critic is a thief of peace, ready to kill joy and remind us that we don't deserve to relax or take care of ourselves. Mark explains that listening to these disparaging remarks leads to feeling unworthy, unhappy, and deficient, dampening joy and reducing self-esteem, potentially causing depression and anxiety. He shares the story of James, a man in his 60s tormented by an ongoing tirade of self-judgment, who felt shrouded by shame despite being a good person. If such criticism came from another person, we'd call it emotional abuse and seek intervention. But because it's internal, it often goes unchallenged, becoming like living room furniture. The core issue is that the critic fundamentally attacks your sense of self-worth. Key takeaways for Chapter 4. The inner critic constantly undermines peace and joy by instilling guilt, anxiety, and a sense of inadequacy. Listening to the critic's harsh words leads to lower self-esteem, unhappiness, and increased chances of depression and anxiety. Self-criticism, if coming from an external source, would be recognized as emotional abuse, yet it often goes unnoticed and unchallenged internally. To counteract this, the book suggests correcting your inner balance sheet by consciously focusing on your positive attributes, accomplishments, and innate goodness. Chapter 5. You are not your fault. Not taking your thoughts personally. A profound realization for Mark was hearing the phrase, "You are not your fault," which felt like shedding a heavy backpack. This insight challenges the common notion that we are to blame for our idiosyncrasies, deficiencies, or foibles. Much of who we are, our body shape, emotional style, family background, or life circumstances, is a sum of innumerable causes and conditions outside our control. Mark argues against the New Age idea that we asked for our life circumstances, stating it can lead to unnecessary guilt. Instead, he emphasizes that while we become responsible for how we play the cards we're dealt as adults, many of our responses are still influenced by arbitrary factors. Our job isn't to blame ourselves, but to meet ourselves with a kind, inquisitive attitude. Similarly, your mind and its judging thoughts are not your fault. They're results of conditioning. Thoughts, Mark explains, think themselves, thousands daily, and we don't need to take them personally or give them power. With mindful awareness, you can distance yourself from their meaning and impact, seeing them as bubbles in a spring. Key takeaways for Chapter 5. Many aspects of who you are, physical traits, emotional style, family background, are a result of innumerable factors beyond your control. You are not inherently your fault for your predispositions or conditioning. Your judging thoughts are largely automatic and a result of conditioning, not necessarily a reflection of who you truly are. Mindfulness allows you to step back, observe these thoughts without taking them personally, and free yourself from their burdensome impact. Chapter 6. How did I get here? The origin and function of the critic. If the inner critic is such an unwanted guest, sometimes feeling like a whole college dorm, why do we have it? Mark explains that like most things in nature, it serves a purpose. Psychologically, Freud called it the superego, an essential part of the psyche designed to rein in primal impulses for societal living. For children, the critic develops to ensure a maximum flow of love, affection, and care from caregivers. It learns to curb impulses, often through shame, as Mark illustrates with his father washing his mouth out with soap for swearing. The critic was doing its job, trying to protect him from embarrassment and rejection. The problem, however, is that the critic does not go away. It's like a broken record, constantly repeating. It internalizes rules from parents, religious leaders, teachers, and peers to protect us from rejection. This is particularly intense during teenage years, where peer pressure and the critic's cruel shaming can have extreme consequences, like teen suicide. Mark points out that the critic, being mostly developed by age 8, operates with a child's simplistic, rigid perspective, making it inflexible and difficult to reason with. By adulthood, it has outlived its usefulness, hindering our ability to flourish by turning a negativity bias on ourselves. Key takeaways for Chapter 6. The inner critic, or superego, developed in childhood as a mechanism to help us conform to societal and family norms and maintain affection from caregivers. It often internalizes the voices and rules of authority figures, sometimes through shaming experiences. The critic's perspective is simplistic and rigid, largely developed by age 8, making it difficult to reason with as an adult. While once serving a protective function, the critic eventually outlives its usefulness and can hinder our well-being by constantly diminishing our worth. Chapter 7. In the critic's defense. Understanding the critic's point of view. Despite the misery it causes, some psychological schools, like internal family systems and voice dialogue, suggest the critic might be a misguided, sometimes harmful ally trying to help or protect us. They encourage understanding its underlying fears and perspectives to transform it into a constructive ally. The critic, in its early role, figured out how to avoid vulnerability, hurt, or rejection, which was absolutely necessary for survival as a child. However, the critic lacks the wisdom to understand that its mechanism doesn't know when to stop. Its neural pathways become so ingrained that judgments often pick up steam as we get older. Mark illustrates this with his own experience on the Golden Gate Bridge, where his critic harped on about car maintenance and procrastination, only for him to realize it was driven by an irrational fear of being judged by an efficient business associate. He explains that the critic's wrathful attacks are counterproductive, leaving him feeling stupid and overwhelmed, stifling positive action. Ultimately, understanding the critic's deeper fears and vulnerabilities is crucial for developing effective strategies to deflect its attacks and live with greater independence. Key takeaways for Chapter 7. Some psychological views see the critic as a misguided ally, attempting to protect us, especially from vulnerability or rejection. While useful in childhood for survival, the critic's protective mechanism doesn't know how or where to stop in adulthood, becoming rigid and counterproductive. Its attacks are often driven by underlying fears, e.g., fear of judgment or failure, that are often irrational or disproportionate. The critic's harshness, even if based on a grain of truth, tends to stifle positive action and undermine self-worth. Chapter 8. From Judgment to Discernment. Mistaken loyalty to the critic. Many people mistakenly believe they need the inner critic to motivate them, fearing they would become lazy, good-for-nothing slobs without its barking voice. Mark counters this, stating that encouragement and positivity are far more effective motivators than the bullwhip or the shaming stick. He argues that our loyalty to the critic often stems from misattributing qualities like discernment, evaluation, and conscience to this crude, 8-year-old brain mechanism. We all possess a more sophisticated moral compass, or conscience, for ethical dilemmas, and can use intuition, reasoning, and empathy to guide our actions. Mark shares the story of a client driven to affairs, whose vicious inner critic prevented her from inquiring into the deeper reasons for her actions, seeking approval due to projected self-negativity. The critic, in this case, simply makes us feel worse and stops the stream of inquiry. The chapter emphasizes the crucial difference between discernment, a necessary tool for clear evaluation, like assessing an exercise regimen, and negative judgment, an unhealthy habit that adds value-laden attacks on self-worth. Discernment simply notes facts, e.g., my exercise regimen isn't working, while judgment adds abusive comments. You are lazy, a slob, that are demotivating. Applying discernment allows us to see situations objectively, without self-recrimination, whether it's a messy garage or a dirty car, freeing us from unnecessary self-attack. Key takeaways for Chapter 8. The belief that the inner critic is necessary for motivation, ethical choices, or work performance is a mistaken loyalty. We have a more sophisticated inner conscience, intuition, and capacity for reasoning and empathy for making wise decisions. It's crucial to differentiate between discernment, objective evaluation, and negative judgment, attacks on self-worth. Judgment, unlike discernment, is reactive, close-minded, and often counterproductive, leading to hopelessness rather than effective action. Part 2. Understanding Self-Judgment. Chapter 9. It's about you, stupid. How the critic attacks your innate value. The core issue with the inner critic is its fundamental attack on your sense of self-worth. Mark illustrates this with Alex, who missed his best friend's birthday party. What started as a simple calendar error quickly escalated into a full-blown assault from the critic, accusing Alex of being unorganized, then a hopeless case, and finally, an unworthy friend. This is an example of the critic expanding a specific error into a universal condemnation, attacking Alex's basic goodness and value as a human being. Mark highlights the principle from educational psychology. It's vital to separate the person from the action when giving criticism. The critic, unfortunately, fails at this, implying that Alex is a bad person for a mistake, rather than simply pointing out an area for improvement. The key for Alex, and for us, is to learn to uncouple the action, however bad, from the person, which allows us to learn from mistakes without our self-esteem collapsing. This approach opens the doorway to transformation. Key takeaways for Chapter 9. The inner critic's primary and most damaging function is attacking your fundamental sense of self-worth. It takes specific mistakes, e.g., forgetting a birthday, and generalizes them into universal condemnations of your character, e.g., you are a bad person. Effective criticism, unlike the critic's attacks, separates the action from the person, focusing on behavior rather than intrinsic value. Recognizing and detaching from the critic's personal attacks allows you to learn from errors without losing your sense of innate value or self-esteem. Chapter 10. The mantra of not enough. Knowing when enough is enough. The critic's pervasive mantra is not enough. Not smart enough, not fit enough, not wealthy enough. Mark gives the example of James, a successful hedge fund trader who made $30 million for his company, yet felt troubled because he could have made more if he had bought sooner or held longer. The critic robbed him of satisfaction by constantly demanding more. This mantra of not enough fuels much of industrialized society's materialism and the hedonistic treadmill. This scarcity mindset extends to our bodies and inner selves, leading to endless projects of physical self-improvement and painful feelings of inadequacy. Mark describes this as the hungry ghost state from Indian cosmology. Big bellies, small mouths, constant unquenchable hunger. When we feel this inner lack, especially as children, we desperately try to fill the void to avoid losing love or approval. A cousin to not enough is the destructive habit of comparing ourselves to others, which guarantees a life of misery. The key antidote is cultivating gratitude. When feeling grateful, we cannot feel deficient. Shifting attention to all the good things, people, and opportunities in our lives transforms a sense of deficiency into fullness and appreciation. This can extend to appreciating your body, your senses, the roads, or even the potters who made your teacup. Gratitude warms the heart and helps count blessings, eroding the scarcity mindset. Key takeaways for Chapter 10. The inner critic perpetuates the mantra of not enough, constantly undermining satisfaction and driving an endless pursuit of more. This scarcity mindset fuels materialism, self-harm, and an inner restlessness that is never quenched, like the hungry ghost. Comparing yourself to others is a damaging habit that entrenches the not enough perspective, leading to misery. Gratitude is a powerful antidote, shifting your mind from deficiency to fullness, warmth, and appreciation for what you already have. Chapter 11. 2020 Hindsight. How the critic fuels regret. We all make decisions we later regret, whether it's an impulse buy, hurtful words spoken in anger, or choices that didn't turn out as planned. While learning from past errors is necessary, the critic adds an unnecessary and unhelpful layer of blame and shame game. Mark admits his own critic has been vocal about his less than lucrative investing attempts, leading to shame and a sense of inadequacy that can cause fear and paralysis in future decisions. The critic holds an unfair advantage of 2020 vision, making it easy to judge past choices when we couldn't have predicted the future. Chastising ourselves rarely helps prevent future mistakes. In fact, it can cloud our thinking with fear and hopelessness. Mark emphasizes that we always do our best with the information at hand, and it's pointless to thrash ourselves for not knowing better. Peace comes from accepting what was and letting go of regrets, trusting we made the best decision at the time. Key takeaways for Chapter 11. The inner critic uses 2020 hindsight to relentlessly blame and shame you for past decisions, even years after the event. This blame and shame game is unhelpful and can lead to fear and paralysis, making it harder to make good decisions in the future. It's important to remember that you always did the best you could with the information and resources available at the time. True peace and freedom come from reconciling with the past, letting go of futile attempts to change what's already happened, and practicing self-forgiveness. Chapter 12. The Inner Boardroom. Understanding the voices in your head. Mark introduces the metaphor of the inner boardroom to describe the multiple streams of critical thoughts, or personalities, in our minds. Rather than just one nagging boss, it can feel like the whole boardroom was inside her head, constantly meeting and issuing judgments. These judges follow you everywhere, even on vacation. Common board members include the board chair, aggressive, shouts loudest, gives orders. The coach, encouraging but constantly tinkering, insisting you're not doing it quite right. The treasurer, critiquing financial decisions, worrying about security. The dilettante, surprisingly, the one who judges you for not having enough fun or pleasure. The perfectionist, never happy, demanding impossibly high standards, leading to guaranteed unhappiness. The taskmaster, tyrant, a slave driver that never lets you rest, constantly reminding you of undone chores. Other characters might include the doomsday voice, the killjoy, or the saboteur. Mark likens this to a cast of actors Disney could make a movie with, but not a film I'd want to see. The key is to bring these voices into the light of day, under the scrutiny of awareness. By identifying, naming, and playfully characterizing them, we can recognize them more easily and hold them with more lightness. Mindfulness allows us to observe these voices from a third-person perspective, like watching a muted TV, making us less affected by them. Key takeaways for Chapter 12. The inner critic manifests as multiple voices or personalities, likened to an inner boardroom, constantly judging you. These board members can include the aggressive board chair, the demanding perfectionist, the relentless taskmaster, or the fun-judging dilettante. Bringing these voices into conscious awareness helps you identify, name, and playfully characterize them, reducing their power. Mindfulness enables you to observe these voices from a detached, third-person perspective, making you less influenced by their demands. Chapter 13. The Critic's Revolving Door. What goes out must go in. This chapter introduces the concept of the critic's revolving door. What goes out, goes in. Mark shares the story of a psychiatrist, viciously critical of his colleagues, whose own life was tormented by his own vicious attacks on himself. He had internalized a critical family culture, where his judge father disdained his career choice. The psychiatrist, despite professional success, turned this same critique inward, leading to sadness and loneliness. This illustrates that if someone is outwardly critical, they are most likely also turning the screw on themselves. While people might lean more towards judging self or others, the key is that we do not want to strengthen the critic's fundamentally problematic point of view. The critic attacks whoever falls under its scrutiny, and if we keep judging others, the guillotine will inevitably fall, on ourselves. To interrupt this habit, the primary defense is simply noticing it with mindful awareness, seeing it as merely thoughts and points of view that are not necessarily true. An effective counterpoint is to consciously focus on the positive in others and yourself. Much like Mark shifts his perspective from fear to warmth when encountering people by looking for positive qualities. This small shift can bring more light into your inner and outer world. Key takeaways for Chapter 13. The critic's revolving door means that the way you judge others often mirrors how you judge yourself. Outwardly critical people are usually also self-critical, experiencing inner torment. Strengthening the habit of judging, whether internally or externally, reinforces the critic's problematic viewpoint. To interrupt this cycle, consciously notice judgmental habits and actively shift your focus to finding the positive or light in others and yourself. Chapter 14. The impact of the critic. How judgments affect us. The inner critic doesn't just operate on a mental level. Its judgments can wreak havoc on physical, emotional, and energetic levels. Mark shares the story of Steve, a high school basketball player who felt an unprecedented heaviness and exhaustion, a foggy brain, and emotional lows after missing a crucial winning shot. These are common symptoms of the critic. The critic causes brain fog, making it difficult to think clearly or make decisions, as if your brain is stuck in the wrong gear. Mark also notes its particularly corrosive impact on parents, especially stay-at-home mothers and fathers, who often feel a sense of never doing it right amidst the chaos of raising children. This can manifest as physical heaviness, dullness, or a sinking feeling, akin to a mild depression. Mark encourages verbalizing the unnoticed self-judgment that might be fueling these feelings, like, "You are too self-centered." Once articulated, the judgment can be questioned and worked with. An energetic contraction or collapse, leading to lethargy, can also be a critic attack. Recognizing these varied impacts, physical, emotional, energetic, is crucial for counteracting the critic and reclaiming parts of yourself and your life that you had lost. Key takeaways for Chapter 14. The inner critic's judgments impact you on mental, physical, emotional, and energetic levels. Common impacts include brain fog, physical heaviness, exhaustion, emotional lows, and a general sense of hopelessness. Unnoticed self-judgments can manifest as profound fatigue or a feeling of being overwhelmed. Verbalizing these underlying judgments allows you to bring them into awareness, question their validity, and begin to release their hold, sometimes by physical movement. Chapter 15. It's all your fault. Understanding the critic in relationships. Close relationships are a primary arena for the critic to surface, as we often unleash our most personal and not-so-pretty selves on loved ones. Mark shares Jenny's story. Despite being a successful executive, she felt a deep need for approval from women, which she judged herself for. Through mindful inquiry, she realized this stemmed from her mother's excruciating parting words, accusing her of disappointment for not pursuing a science career. 30 years later, Jenny was still working with the impact of her mother's harsh words, experiencing inner judgment. Mark notes that Jenny's mother lacked kindness and the understanding that people need to be accepted as they are. He questions how often we criticize others for not conforming to our expectations, holding grudges instead of practicing forgiveness. While it's not about ignoring hurts, it's about acknowledging difficulties without spiraling into tirades of judgments and righteous indignation. Jason's story illustrates subtle relational criticism. His partner's seemingly harmless comments about house chores triggered Jason's own guilt and self-judgment, causing his post-hike clarity to evaporate into a sense of heaviness. This shows how easily the critic is triggered, emphasizing the need for care and kindness in communication to avoid passing on our unconscious, emotionally laden judgments to loved ones, which ultimately harms relationships. Key takeaways for Chapter 15. Close relationships are a common trigger for the inner critic, often echoing internalized judgments from our family of origin. We tend to unleash our critic more on those closest to us, leading to painful outcomes for both parties. The critic fuels grudges and prevents forgiveness, holding ourselves and others to impossibly high standards. Mindfulness helps us recognize unconscious, emotionally laden judgments in our communication, allowing us to speak and act with more care and kindness, thus improving relationships. Part 3. How to Work Mindfully with the Critic. Chapter 16. Mindfulness. The Power of Awareness. Mindfulness, defined as clear awareness, is the life-transforming practice essential for working with the critic. It's the capacity to be present and consciously know what's happening in your experience, moment by moment, whether in your mind, body, or environment. While innate, it requires patience and perseverance to develop. Mark points out how often we're on autopilot, e.g. driving without remembering the route, or in constant partial attention, leading to inattention and a lack of presence. This dopamine-hungry task switching diminishes concentration and effectiveness. A Harvard Medical School study found people were present only 46.9% of the day, but reported being happier when they were present, even during mundane chores. Another study showed a high percentage of people would rather self-administer electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts. Mindfulness offers grounding and focus amidst this chaos, training us to be aware of distractions without reacting. It's like training a puppy to stay steady in the present moment. By focusing on something simple like the breath and noticing when the mind wanders, we strengthen awareness. This cultivated awareness then brings clarity and the possibility of choice, enabling us to intercept unhelpful habits and translate mindful presence into all aspects of life. Key takeaways for Chapter 16. Mindfulness is clear awareness, the ability to be present and know your experience moment by moment. It counters autopilot and constant partial attention, which lead to inattention and reduced happiness. Despite challenges, research shows people are happier when present, even during mundane tasks. Mindfulness, practiced through focusing attention, e.g., on breath, strengthens self-awareness, allowing you to intercept unhelpful habits and make conscious choices. Chapter 17. Hello Judgments. Realizing judgments are just thoughts. Mindfulness fosters a clear self-awareness, essential for dealing with the critic, which often operates as chatter unnoticed by us. The less aware we are, the more it chirps away, slowly eroding our sense of self-worth. Mark uses the amusing term itty-bitty shitty committee for the judging mind. Awareness provides choice and strategies to diminish the critic's influence. A foundational skill is differentiating between a judging thought and other thoughts. Mindfulness helps discern what's healthy and helpful versus not. You can recognize a judging thought by its critical tone, its challenge to your innate value, or the feeling of self-recrimination it induces. Counting judgments, for example, reaching 568 by lunchtime, can reveal how preposterous they are, helping you not take them seriously. Mark shares the story of an actor and theater director student at Spirit Rock Meditation Center whose incessant inner critic became deafening during retreat. After a week of mindfulness, she had a breakthrough. The critic is just a bunch of thoughts. They are just a bunch of thoughts. This Wizard of Oz moment revealed the critic's lack of true authority, bursting the balloon of belief in its rants. While the critic didn't vanish, she gained distance and saw it as just a bunch of words, leading to a significant lightening of her burden and foundational peace. Key takeaways for Chapter 17. Mindfulness helps you become acutely aware of your judging thoughts, which often go unnoticed and erode self-worth. A key skill is distinguishing critical thoughts by their tone, content, attacking innate value, and resulting feelings. Self-recrimination. Recognizing judgments as just thoughts, a bunch of words, bursts their illusion of authority and power over you. This awareness creates distance, allowing you to feel less burdened and find inner peace, even if the critic's voice persists. Chapter 18. Teflon Mind. The Power of Non-Identification. Mark introduces the powerful analogy of a Teflon mind versus a Velcro mind. Normally our mind is like Velcro, where everything sticks, especially judging thoughts, lodging themselves firmly. But mindful awareness creates space and clarity, making thoughts lose their sticky quality. From this perspective, awareness is like the vast sky, and thoughts are merely clouds passing through, not obscuring it. This is the power of non-identification. No longer believing the thoughts or taking on board what they say about us, it allows us to detach, disengage, and not get caught. Mark likens it to a calm grandparent observing a child's tantrum, knowing it will pass without being ruffled. Non-identification is also supported by realizing the critic's messages are, for the most part, neither accurate nor helpful. When judgments arise, Mark suggests saying, "Thank you for your opinion," or "Thanks for your point of view," letting them fall from your mind without sticking, like rain against a window pane. A crucial tool is ceasing to take ownership of the thoughts. Thoughts think themselves. They're an impersonal process, not something we deliberately will into being. Julie, an accountant, experienced automated self-judgment when her personal books didn't tally. Realizing these are automatic, like the brain labeling a bird's morning song, frees us from unnecessary burden of responsibility and allows a sense of spacious ease and peace.
Key takeaways for Chapter 18.
The goal is to cultivate a Teflon mind, where judgments don't stick, unlike the usual Velcro mind. Mindful awareness creates space, allowing you to see thoughts as clouds passing through the sky, rather than defining you. Non-identification means you no longer believe or take personally the critic's words, seeing them as conditioned processes, not objective truths. Recognizing that thoughts often think themselves automatically helps you release the burden of responsibility for them and achieve inner peace. Chapter 19. Keep it in the family. Recognizing the origins of the critic. Have you ever wondered why you have this unpleasant critic? It often represents the internalized voice of parents, caregivers, and other influential people from your past. Mark suggests examining the critic's tone, language, and concerns to see if it reminds you of someone specific. He shares the story of a client whose eating disorder and punishing self-judgments about weight were implanted by her mother, a former figure skating champion obsessed with appearance. Now, recognizing their origin makes it easier to see they are her mother's issues, not hers, and she doesn't need to give them attention. The critic's voice could resemble a parent, grandparent, nanny, religious figure, schoolteacher, or older sibling. In adolescence, peer views can also be highly formative. Even if parents weren't outwardly critical, children soak up the atmosphere. Jamie, a successful physician, internalized her parents' driven nature and habit of being hard on themselves, leading her critic to be tireless in pushing her, even on vacation. Understanding the origin helps you realize the critic's voice is not really your own, but something you inherited, internalized, or borrowed. This awareness fosters compassion for past generations who passed down these patterns. We can then take a stand and meet our hardened inner voices with clarity and firmness, without buying into their harmful sentiments.
Key takeaways for Chapter 19.
The inner critic's voice often originates from internalized attitudes and judgments of parents, caregivers, or other influential figures from your childhood. Identifying whose voice the critic resembles, for example, a critical parent, a strict teacher, demanding peers, can help you understand its source. Even if not directly criticized, you might internalize family values like a strong work ethic or a habit of self-criticism. Recognizing the critic's origin helps you separate your identity from it, fostering compassion for its roots and allowing you to disengage from its impact. Chapter 20. The joke is on you. Seeing the funny side of the critic, Mark emphasizes the importance of humor and levity when dealing with the inner critic, especially in workshops, to cut the heaviness. He shares a common scenario. You set an alarm for a noble goal. The critic, as a life coach, whispers to sleep more. You snooze. And then the critic, as a tyrant, berates you for not getting up and failing. It's a no-win situation. The key is to see the humor in it, because when you believe it, it's plain misery. Mindfulness creates the space in which to see the humor. When too identified, we suffer unnecessarily. Mark playfully pokes fun at his own not-so-perfect habits, like misplacing keys, by saying, "Mr. Mindfulness wins the day," undercutting the critic's sting. This isn't abdicating responsibility, but transforming your relationship with the critic. He cites a New Yorker cartoon of a woman asking her Nobel Prize-winning husband, "It was only one Nobel Prize you won, wasn't it, sweetheart?" Another rhymes with Orange Comic, the checklist to feeling pathetic, comically lists self-defeating thoughts, like relive embarrassing and awful moments that occurred years ago.
Laughing not only helps us not take the critic seriously, but also connects us in our common humanity, allowing us to hold our crazy mind lightly. You can exaggerate judgments to absurdity, worst meditator who has ever lived, or use sarcasm. Oh, really? Thanks for that very useful piece of information. To disengage. Key takeaways for Chapter 20. Humor and levity are powerful secret weapons against the inner critic's heaviness and relentless negativity.
Recognizing the critic's no-win scenarios, for example, judging you for both sleeping in and then for not getting up, highlights its absurdity.
Mindfulness provides the necessary distance to see the irony and playfulness in the critic's comments. Tools like self-depreciating humor, exaggeration, and sarcasm can help you detach from the critic's sting and connect with others in shared human foibles. Chapter 21. Reality Check. Are your judgments really true? The validity of the critic's claims rarely stands up to scrutiny.
Mark's exercise of having students write down their top 10 tunes, most common self-judgments, often causes horror, but brings objectivity to what is normally a murky inner process. On paper, people often notice how biased, distorted, petty, or inconsequential their judgments are.
Mark introduces Byron Katie's 4 questions for examining thoughts, views, and assumptions. Is this thought or belief true? Can you know this thought or belief is really true? How do you react when you believe this thought or belief? Or, can you think of one good reason for holding on to this thought or belief? Who or how would you be without this thought or belief?
He recounts working with a college student who believed, "I'm a bad person," due to dropping out. Applying these questions revealed that believing it made him feel small, ashamed, and unworthy. Without the thought, he envisioned being lighter, listening to his intuition without familial guilt. This process doesn't make judgments disappear, but exposes their destructiveness and fuels motivation to release them. Mark shares his own long-held belief of being disorganized in business, which a consultant debunked by pointing out how highly organized he had to be to juggle multiple projects. Our ego often clings to old, painful identities because they feel safe with what is known, but the freedom from releasing these views motivates us to align with reality.
Key takeaways for Chapter 21.
The critic's judgments often don't stand up to scrutiny when brought into conscious awareness and examined.
Applying questions like, is it true? And who would you be without this thought? Can reveal the destructiveness of believing self-judgments.
Self-judgments, even if based on a grain of truth, are often distorted, biased, and disproportionate. Releasing old, painful identities, based on false judgments, creates freedom and motivates living in alignment with reality. Chapter 22. Sorry, I'm not interested. Living with disinterest in the critic. Mark finds it startling to encounter people who are relatively free from the curse of the judging mind. They possess a lightness and an indifference, even immunity to the critic's words, which fall from their minds like water off a duck's back. This quality fosters resilience, allowing them to view setbacks as temporary obstacles and approach life with an optimistic bias. The main way to cultivate this disinterest is by realizing there's not much value in what the critic says. Its painful delivery outweighs any grain of truth. Once this is understood, it's easier to hear it as background static or distortion on the radio and stop giving it the time of day. The critic's predictability also helps. Its formulaic, almost scripted nature reduces its pull. Mark shares the example of a university professor who, after years of lecturing, knows his critic will rev up after any perceived error. Now, he can distance himself, hearing it is distant traffic, or responding with a nonchalant, "Aha, there you are, thanks for your point of view," which diffuse the potency. Knowing the usual cues, especially when feeling vulnerable, allows us to anticipate the critic and practice being less interested in its broadcasts. You can shift your attention to something physical, sensory, uplifting, or pleasant. Use a quick retort like, "Oh please," delivered with a disinterested tone, to show you're not bothered by its repetitive comments.
Key takeaways for Chapter 22.
A key to freedom from the critic is cultivating disinterest in its words. allowing them to fall from your minds like water off a duck's back. This disinterest is built on the realization that the critic's judgments offer little value, and their painful delivery outweighs any potential truth. Recognizing the critic's predictable and formulaic nature helps reduce its power and influence. You can actively practice shifting your attention away from the critic's background static to more present, positive, or neutral stimuli. Part 4. The Power of Love. Chapter 23. Befriending Yourself. You are not your enemy. The shift from judgment to kindness is perhaps the most important part of our work. It demands embracing all of who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mark quotes Carl Jung, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." While Mark, as a young seeker, initially pursued enlightenment to transcend pain and struggles, he later realized this was a misdirected escape from his own unaddressed wounds. Genuine healing requires a journey of descent, turning toward ourselves with kindness and holding our pain, fears, and vulnerability as we would tend to a friend in distress. The critic, however, only knows how to relate to these raw, wounded places through fear and judgment, often shutting down feelings with harsh, shaming words. Mark has seen successful public figures who, outwardly charming, inwardly harbored shame about certain feelings that had lingered from childhood, leading to an inner split and emptiness despite external triumphs. He shares the story of Ted, a brilliant neurosurgeon who, after losing his parents young, hardened himself and pushed down sadness with work, shaming himself for being weak. But as he began to wake up to the chasm inside, he learned to integrate the pain with kindness, realizing he no longer needed to run from himself or seek external validation. Befriending ourselves means turning toward our pain and insecurities with compassion, not persecution. This requires a firm, compassionate strength to keep the critic at bay, allowing tender feelings to emerge. Mark recalls a radical moment when, overwhelmed by life's challenges, a kind voice emerged. "Oh, this is hard for you," allowing him to feel vulnerability instead of self-attack. Key takeaways for Chapter 23. The essential transformation involves turning towards and befriending all parts of yourself, even the wounded, vulnerable, and dark ones, with kindness. Running from pain or trying to transcend it ultimately doesn't work. Genuine healing requires integration and loving acceptance of your whole being. The inner critic's harshness often serves to shut down vulnerability, but this leads to an inner split and emptiness. Cultivating firm, compassionate strength allows you to be your own ally, holding your pain tenderly and keeping the critic at bay. Chapter 24. The Power of Vulnerability. The Hidden Strength of the Heart. Mark admits that despite years of practice, the critic can still get under his skin, especially when feeling challenged or when many details of life were falling through the cracks. A natural reaction to this pain is to harden, to close down, but this freezes emotions and prevents effective dealing with critical voices. Mark experienced this rawness when he cracked open to the pain of his critic's shaming voice. This rawness is key to vulnerability. The challenge is becoming comfortable with the innate vulnerability of being human, holding it with a loving attention, so painful feelings can unfold and slowly move through us. It's about shifting allegiance from the judge to yourself, caring for yourself as you would a friend in distress, offering soothing words and a caring presence. Compassion, the heart's natural response to pain, arises from this undefended stance. This isn't aggressive defense, but a grounded, vulnerable strength that won't tolerate harm. Mark calls it fierce compassion, which firmly says to the critic, "No, please don't talk to me like that. That is not helpful, it is hurtful." This strength allows you to acknowledge your struggles without self-persecution, as when Mark, late and with a dead car battery, felt compassion for his overwhelmed state instead of self-attack. This shift allows the natural strength of the heart to emerge, making judgments like ripples on water, flowing away and leaving no trace. Key takeaways for Chapter 24. A natural but unhelpful response to the critic's pain is to harden and close down. True healing requires opening to rawness and vulnerability. Vulnerability is a hidden strength of the heart that allows painful feelings to unfold when held with loving attention. Shift your allegiance from the inner critic to yourself, offering yourself the same care and kindness you would a dear friend in distress.
Fierce compassion is a strong, grounded, heartfelt stance that firmly says no to the critic's hurtful attacks, enabling self-protection and empowering healing.
Chapter 25. The Power of Love. Turning from self-hatred to self-kindness. Love is the single unifying principle of all world religions, but truly loving others requires cultivating love for oneself as a foundation. Mark, raised Catholic, struggled with the instruction to love unconditionally, finding it lacked practical guidance. He found this guidance in Buddhist loving-kindness meditation, or metta practice, which means friendliness. Metta practice begins with extending kindness to yourself, holding yourself with friendliness and care. This is often the hardest part, especially after a lifetime of judgments, but it's the most important place to start and the most radical antidote to the critic. The practice uses language, phrases like, "May I be happy, safe, peaceful, and free," to literally rewire our brain by creating new neural pathways, supplanting negative judgment with kindness. Mark explains how his inner voice, trained by kindness, now overrides self-chastisement for stress with compassionate inquiry.
"Oh, this is hard for you. Why don't you take some time to slow down?" Period.
When awareness is imbued with kindness, it becomes a powerful combination that can transform deep self-hatred. He shares Joanna's story of a hard stone in her heart, which, through body-centered inquiry and warm loving kindness, began to melt, revealing a small, tender shoot of new life and integration. This gardener analogy highlights preparing the soil of the heart with mindfulness and watering it with kind words and loving presence.
Key takeaways for Chapter 25. Cultivating self-love is the indispensable foundation for truly loving others.
Loving kindness, metta, meditation, is a powerful antidote to the critic, starting with extending kindness and friendliness to yourself. By repeating phrases of kindness, e.g., "May I be happy, safe, peaceful, and free," you rewire your brain to create new neural pathways of self-kindness.
An awareness infused with kindness can transform even deep self-hatred, allowing a tender shoot of new life to grow from a once hardened heart.
Chapter 26. Transforming Pain. Moving from self-harm to self-compassion. This chapter delves into self-compassion as a transformative force. Mark recounts James's story, abused as an altar boy, who internalized shame and blame, leading to a life haunted by those memories. His critic reinforced the belief that it was his fault, a double tragedy on top of the original violation. In the safe space of a silent retreat, James, for the first time, could ignore the critical voices and instead feel the emotions beneath them. Hurt, anger, grief. He was able to see his younger self through the eyes of an adult, with compassion, which changes everything and moves us out of blame and into mercy. Compassion is described as a quivering of the heart in response to pain, intimately connecting with suffering to alleviate and transform it. Many of our self-judgments are about already painful experiences, like physical injury, chronic illness, or feeling overwhelmed by responsibilities. We don't need to add to our distress by listening to the critic. When we feel compassion for enduring these struggles, we become our own ally rather than our enemy. This requires the courage to probe painful areas and keep the critic at bay with a firm, compassionate stance. Compassion, a courageous force that is fierce yet kind, doesn't flee or judge pain. It meets it with strong, kind presence, diminishing the critic's influence. Key takeaways for Chapter 26. Self-compassion is crucial for transforming the pain caused by self-judgment and past trauma. Victims of abuse often internalize blame. Self-compassion allows them to feel the original hurt without the added burden of self-recrimination. Compassion is the heart's natural healing response to pain, enabling you to become your own ally in the face of suffering rather than perpetuating self-harm. It requires fierce yet kind courage to turn toward your pain, and firmly keep the inner critic from interfering. Chapter 27. Giving up hope of a better past. From self-blame to self-forgiveness, Mark asks, who hasn't caused someone harm through their words and actions? Not a single hand is raised. Making mistakes is a natural part of the human condition. Yet, we are often so hard on ourselves, with self-blame, driven by an idealized and impossible standard of human behavior. Mark's meditation training helped him make peace with his humanness, no longer holding himself to an impossible ideal. A key realization from meditation is that there is no time but now. The past is a dream, the future an illusion. Therefore, self-forgiveness is the willingness to stop trying to fix our past or make it better. We try to fix the past to avoid lingering pain, but the mind's resistance to feeling pain leads to replaying, rehashing, arguing, instead of acknowledging vulnerability and sadness. Mark reflects on his own past, where he, a victim of bullying, also learned to dole it out to a classmate. He can now see this was a painful set of conditions, allowing him to feel tender toward myself, the classmate, and all the ways such actions continue today, out of blindness, fear, and hatred. Self-forgiveness allows releasing judgment and shame, even while taking responsibility. As we age, our hearts may do a life review, often focusing on relationships where we regret letting people down. Mark's father, for example, questioned his own presence as a young parent. The judge, with its 20/20 hindsight, will point out how we could have done better. But we must remember we always do the best we can. Extending self-forgiveness in the present and for the future becomes a positive mental habit that releases judgment, regret, and the torment of shame, allowing the loving heart to grow in all directions. Key takeaways for Chapter 27. Self-blame for past mistakes stems from an idealized and impossible standard of human behavior. Self-forgiveness means accepting that the past is now a dream, and what is done, releasing the futile hope of changing it. The mind often rehashes past regrets to avoid feeling the lingering pain, but true freedom comes from acknowledging that pain with self-compassion. Forgiving yourself for past choices, even while taking responsibility, is a positive mental habit that frees your heart from judgment, regret, and shame. Part 5. Beyond the Critic. Chapter 28. Inclining toward happiness. Paying attention to the good. Whatever the mind frequently dwells and ponders upon, that becomes the inclination of the mind. This powerful principle means we are the product of what we do, think, and say. We always have a choice to cultivate healthy or harmful habits of mind. Mark illustrates this with the ancient story of a gatekeeper who tells new arrivals they will find the new town's people mean or kind, to be just like the people they left, highlighting that our perception creates our reality. Optimistic people experience life more positively, while those who focus on flaws tend to keep finding that life and the people in it are also flawed. Mark recalls a seminar on the inner critic, where participants, upon entering, immediately found fault with the room, cushions, lighting, carpet, comically demonstrating their negativity bias. This bias comes from our evolutionary heritage, where hypervigilance for threats aided survival. However, in modern life, this hardwiring can make us view the world with fear, distrust, and suspicion. We can intervene by noticing this negative bias and consciously turning our attention to what is positive, stopping the glass half-empty perspective. Mark describes how he learned to objectively view himself by letting in positive feedback from others, recognizing their shared perspective was more accurate than my own distorted one. Begin to see your own good, wholesome qualities, and similarly, look for the attentive, kind, helpful, generous, or industrious traits in others, rather than just their issues. Taking in the beauty of nature, the joy of friendship, or simple blessings like clean water, can slowly help nudge your heart in a much more uplifting and wholesome direction. Key takeaways for Chapter 28. What your mind dwells on shapes your reality. You have the choice to cultivate healthy or harmful habits of mind and heart. Our inherited negativity bias can make us perceive life with fear and suspicion, even when not necessary. Actively shifting your attention towards the good and positive in yourself and others can counterbalance this bias and brighten your mood. Practice letting in positive feedback about yourself and consciously appreciating blessings to cultivate a more balanced and uplifting self-perception. Chapter 29. Who are you? Seeing the good in others. Mark shares Rick Hansen's impactful story. A college quarterback's simple comment, "You're good and I'm going to throw to you," transformed Hansen's self-esteem as an athlete and improved his play. This illustrates how acknowledging abilities in others creates unseen ripples. Our perception of others is often filtered by our own biases and prejudices, especially when the critic has been interfering with our hardware. The critic's revolving door means that if we fixate on our own faults, we'll do the same to others. This leads to feeling contracted, separate, perhaps a little me. The parables like the Good Samaritan teach us to overcome the barrier of difference and see the truth that all people want to be safe and happy, accessing empathy for their plight.
Cutting through the negative bias helps us see people in a different, fresh way, noticing what unites us, our common humanity, rather than what divides us. Shifting attention to others' positive qualities can brighten our mood and day. Mark practices this by consciously looking for anything positive when someone enters a room, changing his initial apprehension to greater warmth, interest, and positivity. Being around friends who naturally see the good in others can also shift your own inner state towards something brighter and lighter. The just like me meditation, thinking phrases like, "Just like me, this person wants to be happy," helps actively sense this connection and common humanity, especially during conflict. Key takeaways for Chapter 29. Our perception of others is often distorted by our own biases and the inner critic's interference. Judging others reinforces our own self-criticism, leading to feelings of contraction and separation. Actively seeking and acknowledging the positive qualities in others helps cut through biases and fosters a sense of common humanity and connection. Practicing just like me, meditation, or simply focusing on positive attributes in others can brighten your mood and transform your relationships. Chapter 30. Inner Peace. A life beyond the critic. Imagine life without the critic, doing things out of sheer joy, unconcerned by its judgments, feeling an incredible relief, like dropping a 60-pound backpack. This is the lightness of being free from the critic, a sense of ease and playfulness. People freed from the critic view mistakes as learning opportunities, laugh at their foibles, and maintain an optimistic, glass-is-half-full attitude. Crucially, regardless of whether the tirade of self-judgment stops, we can find space and ease and no longer identify with our condemning thoughts. The critic's voice becomes like the sound of birds chattering in the trees, not affecting us. Our heart becomes coated with Teflon, letting insults wash off like rainwater. This freedom brings a shift in self-worth. Instead of seeing ourselves through the critic's lens, we use a kind, clear, and wise attention to sense our innate goodness and inherent right to exist. We learn we are okay as we are, finding inner contentment and genuine self-love without a relentless path of self-improvement to appease the critic. With wisdom, we understand the critic's triggers, messing up, vulnerability, fear, and realize we don't have to listen to it, seeing its viewpoint as skewed. This fosters an amused, detached perspective and allows us to rest in the truth that our basic nature is good and complete, just as it is. Key takeaways for Chapter 30. Living beyond the critic brings a profound sense of lightness, ease, and inner peace, like dropping a heavy burden. It means seeing mistakes as learning opportunities and cultivating an optimistic outlook. Even if the critic's voice doesn't disappear, you can learn to disidentify with it, allowing its insults to wash off like rainwater. Freedom from the critic allows you to reclaim your inherent self-worth, recognizing your innate goodness, and finding contentment just as you are. Chapter 31. The Critic Toolbox. Defending yourself against judgments. Dealing with a lifelong mental process like the inner critic requires multiple strategies. Mark presents a critic toolbox, a collection of tried and tested strategies for defending yourself against the force of self-judgment. These tools, cultivated over a lifetime, are crucial for ongoing freedom. The key components in this toolbox include mindfulness, the indispensable tool for awareness, allowing you to see critical thoughts objectively and step back from their impact. It helps you become alert to the critic's causes and effects. Feeling the impact. Shifting attention to your heart to feel the pain of the critic's abusive words cultivates self-compassion, a powerful force against further self-judgment. Speaking to the pain. Directly telling the critic, "Ow, that hurts," or "It's really painful when you talk to me like that," shifts allegiance from the judge to your hurting self. The RAIN exercise. A practice for working with painful emotions. Recognize, allow, inquire, and non-identify with feelings. The judgment might be true. So what? Acknowledging the factual truth of a judgment, e.g., you forgot a birthday, without letting the critic tirelessly bash your self-worth. Martial arts maneuver, flowing with the energy of judgments by saying, "Thank you for your point of view," deflating their power without arguing. Disinterest. A first line of defense where you know the critic is there but don't give it the time of day. Like background noise, humor and exaggeration. Playfully teasing the critic, or exaggerating its judgments to absurdity, helps you not take them so seriously. Inquiry, and "Is it true?" Questioning the validity of judgments, especially those using always, never, bar, should, to expose their inaccuracy. Constructive dialogue. Asking the critic, or yourself, what fears or concerns lie beneath its attacks to resolve deeper issues. Firmness. Enough is enough. Meeting the critic's attacks with a direct no or shut up, from a place of fierce protectiveness and healthy love for ourselves. Replacing judging thoughts with neutral statements to underscore that they are just words with no inherent power. Loving kindness. Shifting from self-judgment to self-kindness through warm, caring attitudes and repeating kind wishes for yourself. Wisdom. The overarching learning that arises from understanding the critic's patterns, triggers, and skewed viewpoint, leading to a detached, amused perspective and a deep knowing of your inherent goodness. These tools, combined with consistent practice, offer a path to genuine transformation and freedom from the critic's grip, allowing you to live a more fulfilling life. Key takeaways for Chapter 31. Freedom from the inner critic requires a toolbox of multiple, integrated strategies, cultivated over time. Core tools include mindful awareness to observe judgments, feeling their painful impact to foster self-compassion, and directly addressing the critic's harshness. Techniques like RAIN, disinterest, humor, and questioning the truth of judgments help detach and reduce their power. Ultimately, a firm, compassionate stance and the practice of self-kindness and self-forgiveness replace self-hatred, leading to wisdom and inner peace. Imagine living a life where the ceaseless whispers of self-doubt and judgment are replaced by an unwavering sense of peace, clarity, and self-acceptance. A life where you are your own greatest champion, navigating challenges with kindness and resilience, free from the torment of your inner critic. This is not merely a dream, but a tangible reality within your grasp, accessible through the transformative practices of mindfulness and compassion. If this journey to inner peace and freedom resonates with you, and you're ready to make peace with your mind, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more insights to transform your life.